Before we begin the story of why did this mysterious dog walk miles to a wedding he wasn't invited to? Heartbreaking animal story. I invite you to get comfortable. Let the world fade for a while. If you find yourself drawn into these quiet tales, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more stories find their way to the firelight. Now, let's begin. It was the first week of October, the kind of morning where fog lingers like a question not yet asked. The air was still. The trees, tall sentinels of maple and pine, said nothing. In a secluded valley far from the nearest paved road, a family gathered under ivory linen strung between 4 wooden posts. Wine-colored leaves twirled down like slow confetti. Paper lanterns trembled in the chilled breeze. The wedding was already beginning. A violin found its voice. The groom caught his breath. The bride stepped forward, heart steady, shoes silent on the mulch-covered aisle. That was when he appeared. From the tree line, slow, certain, came a dog. Golden fur, damp at the paws. Honey-brushed ears. No tags, no collar. Head high, eyes calm. He walked like he'd always known this place. Some guests exchanged hushed glances. Others froze mid-sip. One child whispered, "Whose is he?" No one answered. No one moved. The dog passed the rows of family, the wooden benches, the cider cups trembling slightly in guests' hands. He stopped only when he reached the altar, then lowered himself, gently, at the bride's feet. He did not bark. He did not whimper. He looked up at her. She looked down, brow furrowing, breath catching not from nerves, but something else. A feeling, slippery, familiar. For just a second, the weight of a vanished name brushed her ribs. She didn't speak it, she couldn't have, but whatever it was, the dog seemed to already know. The officiant cleared his throat. A bird called from deep in the trees. Then the ceremony resumed, but no one really stopped watching the dog. And when vows were exchanged and the groom kissed her hand, he didn't wag his tail, didn't move. He just blinked once, eyes old and soft and seeing too much. Long after the applause, long after the clink of glasses, he stayed, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. And somehow, he wasn't a surprise. Not to her. The dog lingered like a gentle rumor, never loud, never gone, and somehow everywhere. He wandered between guests during the reception, nose close to the earth, paws soundless on the tamped grass. No one claimed him, and no one quite asked him to leave. The older relatives gave soft smiles. Countryside has its own way of celebrating, one said, sipping warm cider. Children followed behind the dog in curious clusters, like satellites trailing a forgotten sun. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling he had come specifically for her. She sat briefly on the edge of the wooden porch Caleb's brothers built last spring, watching the autumn colors fold into fire. Her dress gathered at the knees. She stared over her bouquet, spinning a cosmos flower between thumb and forefinger. She'd always loved things that lived quiet lives. Mushrooms under rotting logs, lichen stitched to stones, spores so small they drifted through seasons unnoticed. But dogs? Dogs were noise, energy, barking and panting and needing. She never had one, never even thought much about them. It wasn't because she disliked animals. Quite the opposite. But her father had sneezed around feathers and fur, and her mother said caring for a pet was something you shouldn't take lightly, or take at all. Still, sometimes an ache settled in her when she saw them. Dogs curled next to strangers on parkside benches. Dogs bounding into ponds. Dogs looking up the way only a creature without guile could. She once mentioned it to Caleb, years back, on a train bound for a hiking excursion. "I think I'd like a dog someday," she had said, almost apologetically. He smiled and replied, "Then we'll get one. A wise, lazy one who likes moss and cookies." She remembered laughing. He always made it sound easy. But today wasn't a someday. It was their wedding. A little ceremony, tucked into nature, meant for close friends. Basket lunches, awkward toasts. No dogs invited. And yet, she looked toward the edge of the gathering, where the golden dog sat near the silk-draped bar. He wasn't eating, wasn't seeking scratches or tricks. Just observing, like he'd been waiting for this day. For her. Caleb joined her on the porch, taking a seat beside her and lacing their fingers together gently. "Your silent guest still hasn't left," he said with a smile. "I know. You think he's lost?" Clara shook her head slowly. "If he is, he doesn't seem to mind." They sat in silence for a moment, shoulders touching. "Maybe he belongs to someone nearby," Caleb offered. "Maybe," she said, and looked at the dog again. Her chest felt hollow in an odd, aching way. Not sad, exactly. Just unsettled. Because looking at him made her feel like she had forgotten something terribly important. Like a name she once loved and lost. The reception eased into late afternoon as the sun began its gentle descent, casting everything in amber and rust. Somewhere between a toast and the clink of cider mugs, someone brought out desserts, small cakes, slivered tarts, sugar-dusted things resting in reused baskets lined with linen. The dog lingered just beyond the circle of laughter. No begging, no whining, just there, near the dessert table, children balanced paper plates stacked with sweet squares, while a few older guests sat on hay bales turned into makeshift seats. Conversation turned softer, eased by warmth and wine. One elder guest, Clara's great-aunt Marjorie, sat quietly, her cane resting against a picnic bench. Her hand trembled slightly as she raised a fork, her plate holding a single slice of honey cake, flecked with dried jasmine petals. She didn't see her napkin catch the breeze. She did, however, see the cake slip, slow, silent, and fall. It landed at her feet, face down in the soft grass. Marjorie sighed, disappointed but unsurprised. Before she could bend to pick it up, the dog was there, silent as a breeze. He did not dive toward the dessert. He simply waited. Marjorie looked down, eyeing the golden fur, the calm eyes. "Well," she said, voice rasped by years, "you've manners. I'll give you that." The dog merely sat, posture a mix of attention and patience. She chuckled under her breath, and from her basket pulled a second slice, untouched, its icing unspoiled. Suppose good boys ought to be rewarded. She held it out, palm flat. He leaned in gently, took the cake without force, without mess. Then, almost ceremoniously, he lay down beside her. Not curled up, not slouched, just placed himself beside her as if he'd always belonged there. Marjorie chewed thoughtfully. "Had a dog once," she murmured, eyes brushing the horizon. "Looked a bit like you. Used to follow me to school. Wait at the edge of the orchard, then walk me home. My father never knew." The dog did not stir. She sighed. "They don't stay long, do they?" "Just long enough." Nearby, Clara watched the whole exchange from beneath a lace-draped arbor. She couldn't quite hear them, but she saw Marjorie's smile, the tender curve rare in that weathered face. She felt her throat tighten again. She thought of the scarf around her neck and how it now felt a little too warm. How there was something about the way he'd waited for that second slice, not desperate, not hopeful, just sure. The music shifted. Somebody had brought out a mandolin. Laughter sparked like cinders in chill air. The dog rose slowly, leaving Marjorie's side without fanfare. He padded once more among the crowd, unhurried. As if he had infinite time. As if this moment, like the cake, was already his. Clara stood and crossed to her great-aunt. "What did you say to him?" she asked softly. Marjorie smiled with half her mouth. "Didn't need to say anything. He already knew." Twilight seeped into the trees like spilled ink, stretching long shadows across the mossy trail behind the old Tenley property. Clara hadn't meant to wander far, just a breath, a slice of peace before dancing and well-wishers resumed their sweet siege on the little wedding tucked beneath the canopy. Caleb fell into step beside her without a word, fingers brushing her waist as they walked. No conversation, just the hush of pine, the two of them, and the quiet that settles when something important has just been spoken. Behind them, muffled laughter drifted toward the woods. Soft music scraped a tune over the trees. But here, the air was cooler, stained with cedar and the slow decay of leaves. Then, just 4 paces back, the sound of a second pair of steps. Soft, deliberate. They didn't need to turn. He was there. She heard him breathing, the faint hush of it like wind brushing low through fern. He didn't hurry, didn't whine or dart or clatter through the fallen twigs. Just padded along, quiet as memory. "I think he's following us," Caleb said, his voice like a smile under a blanket. "I know," Clara whispered. She glanced once over her shoulder. The dog walked politely behind them, posture tall, tail low. Not chasing, not intruding. Like he knew what space meant. When they slowed at a thick-trunked birch, he slowed too. They paused at a hollow stump shaped like a broken bowl. Moss gathered at its rim like someone had tried to mend it with green thread. Clara's hands found her own fingers, twisting gently. She should have said something about how the woods felt different with him here. Like a page she'd torn out long ago was being smoothed back in quietly, without scolding. But she couldn't find the words. Caleb stepped forward and picked up a pine cone, turning it over in his palm. Behind them, the dog sniffed the air once, then sat. Just sat. "Maybe he's waiting for us to notice him," Caleb said, not quite a joke. Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe he already knows we have." They stood there for another minute. The wind played with the hem of her veil. A crow passed overhead, alone and without sound, just its shadow turning the path behind them cold for the briefest instant. When they turned to head back, the dog rose and fell into pace again, close enough to be felt but not touched. Clara didn't look at him this time, because if she did, she feared something precious might spill. Like a name, or a forgotten promise made when stars were smaller. The sun folded itself low over the hills as the last of the cider was poured and the musicians tucked away their bows. Warm light pooled like honey in the creases of tree bark. Guests lingered in soft clusters, and laughter struck a quieter note as people settled into twilight. Clara's younger sister, Wren, coaxed her toward the fence that edged the clearing. "Just one more photo," Wren insisted. "Come on, your veil's still glowing." Clara smiled tiredly but followed. She stepped into a golden shaft of light where the fence had been half swallowed by moss. A few last leaves fluttered down around her shoulders, catching in the lace at her back. Wren lifted her camera. "Hold still. The light's perfect." In the final hush before the shutter blinked, there was that feeling again, like breath dragging along cold glass. Clara didn't speak it, wouldn't have known how to. Wren clicked. Laughter from the meadow, clinks of cups being stacked. The scent of loam and rosemary drifting from somewhere nearby. "Got it," Wren said, checking the image. "You look like you've been touched by a ghost." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Thanks?" Her sister grinned and turned the screen for her to see. Clara's face was soft in profile. The fence post angled behind her like the frame of an old painting. Her veil caught the light like milk in tea. But it was the background that pulsed in her gut. There, just barely in frame, beyond the gold-weaved grasses. The dog, standing, perfectly still, head turned ever so slightly toward the lens. His eyes, they did not reflect the flash. They burned, like he carried the sun inside his skull. Like something eternal had momentarily borrowed fur and bone and stepped into her story for just this shutter's length. Clara's mouth opened, but no words came. Ren was already flipping to the next shot, talking about bokeh blurs and magical light. Clara stood still. The camera was handed off. Ren was called away toward a crowd of cousins. Leaves fell quietly onto the shoulder of Clara's dress. She looked to the brush that framed the photo's edge. No dog. Just whined along the fence. Just a hush thick with something almost said. She touched her throat. Her pulse gave a single hard pound, then softened. It was him. Or, not him, not exactly. But something that remembered being him. And maybe, just maybe, something she had once promised to remember in return. The children made a game of it. They circled him like moons, offering names the way you'd offer pebbles to a tide pool. Hopeful, thinking maybe one might be the right shape to ripple back. Goldie, said one, tugging on her braid. Dusty, said another, because he looks like he rolled in sunlight. Apple butter, laughed a third. He smells like cookies. The dog gave them courtesy blinks. The sort adults give children when they're listening politely, but the story's already been heard before. Still, they tried. Wes? Sonny? Maple? Captain? Leo? He turned. Not sharply, not obviously. Just a slight shift of the ears, a flick of recognition at the name. Leo. The children didn't notice, but one of the older guests caught it, mid-sip of mulled wine, and smiled in that knowing way people past 70 sometimes do. Clara had noticed, too. She stood at the edge of the group, hands loose at her sides, the thin silk of her dress brushing against her knees. A tendon in her neck pulled tight. Leo. Her mouth didn't shape the word, but her breath curled around it, silent. It was a name from long ago, stored in a corner she hadn't dusted in years. The kind of remembering that doesn't come gently. It presses. She used to whisper it into the bends of notebooks as a child, doodle it between stars and horses and imagined maps. A name that once fit inside a secret. It couldn't be, but what if? She moved away from the crowd quietly, as if her body knew she needed stillness to think. Behind her, the children gave up on names and moved on to chasing tails instead. Clara stood beneath a scrap of vine woven into the fencework and closed her eyes. The memory came abruptly, not as an image, but a feeling. Warm pause, a shape pressing close under the porch during a rainstorm. A breath, rhythmic and safe, against her ankle. She hadn't thought of that pup in years. The one she fed scraps of toast and named for the constellation she only half understood. Nobody else had seen him but her. Or maybe, they had just chosen not to. Her mother said stray dogs couldn't be trusted, that they brought fleas and inconvenience, and that little girls shouldn't give their hearts to things with expiration dates shorter than their own. Clara had only nodded, even as her chin wobbled, even as she let go of the thought like a balloon in a heavy wind. But how strange, how utterly precise, that the name would return now, without summoning. The dog lay sprawled in a patch of thinning grass, head low, eyes half closed but aware. She watched as he rolled once, stretched his limbs, then looked directly at her. Not expectantly, not pleading, simply stating, "You remembered." The wind came quick, like laughter escaping a mouth that had waited too long. It picked up Clara's scarf from where it rested loose on her shoulders, gray wool, knit with a soft pearl, and flung it into the wide golden field with a child's unthinking joy. Clara yelped and reached, but the scarf was already somersaulting past the split-rail fence, dancing wild among the swaying grass. Without hesitation, the dog bolted. Not a frenzy, no chaos in the way he moved. Just speed, precision, as though this was something he'd done before. As though chasing down a part of her had been written into his bones long ago. "He's got it," someone called from the porch. Clara stood motionless, hand still outstretched, the chill settling into her collarbone where the warmth had been. The scarf tumbled once more and nestled into a bramble-thick patch near the foot of the slope. Blackberry vines webbed over the area, dark, thorn-crowned and tight-knit. Most dogs would hesitate. He did not. With a grace that made even Marjorie pause mid-sip, he slipped paw first into the thicket, careful, deliberate. The thorns snagged at the air, not daring touch him. He lowered his muzzle, not to sniff, but to gently catch the wool between his teeth. No tugging, no chewing. He backed out slowly. Brambles didn't bite. When he returned, scarf trailing from his mouth like a banner of dusk, the guests, even the rowdy cousins near the cider keg, went silent. He padded straight to Clara, dropped the scarf at her feet, and sat. No pride in the gesture. No announcement. Just, "Here." Clara bent slowly, fingers trembling more than the scarf did in the wind. She picked it up, folded it once, then, instinctively, raised it to her nose. Lavender. Her mother used to soak her yarn in lavender water. Said it softened the strands and kept moths away. Every Christmas scarf she ever knit had the smell. Every one Clara had since donated or buried in donation bags or lost in moves. Except this one. She looked at the dog. His head tilted, one ear cocked in quiet attention. Her mother had said no dogs. Never again. But Leo, back then, hadn't listened. Neither had she. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. "Thank you." The dog blinked in the way that meant everything and nothing. He turned away, rejoining the vague edge of gathering where shadows deepened and crickets tried out new songs. Guests resumed murmurs. A fork scraped a plate. A child pointed and said, "See? He's magic." Clara clutched the scarf at her chest. Not for warmth. For memory. For proof that some things, once loved, weren't ever truly gone. The wind softened after midnight. Branches barely stirred, and the trees had settled into their autumn hush, dry with the secrets of another day gone. Inside the honeymoon cottage, everything was still. The fire in the stone hearth had faded to a red whisper. A few charred logs sighed their last. The air smelled like cedar and candle smoke, and from the edge of the room, the faint echo of a slow-playing phonograph bled into the quiet. Clara lay awake, eyes open against the dark, her back curved to Caleb's exhale rising and falling in rhythm behind her. A comfort, a tether, but still, she couldn't sleep. Her fingers curled tight beside her collarbone. Something was trying to surface. She shut her eyes and listened, as if memory could be caught on a fishing line if the water stayed still long enough. It came gently. At first, just images. A farmhouse porch. The hollow clunk of a wooden step. A wildflower in a chipped mug on the sill. Then warmth pressed into her legs, soft and heavy and alive. 7 years old. There had been a dog. Golden from nose to tail, like a fallen sunbeam. Silent, as though he knew he didn't quite belong. But loyal as a root. He'd shown up one rainy morning, soaked and watchful. She saw him from the kitchen window and ran outside barefoot, not even grabbing a towel. She made a tent from her raincoat and shared it with him beneath the oak. For 21 days, she fed him scraps, whispered stories into his fur like prayers, hid him when her mother came outside, named him Leo, made him into a whole hidden world. She never told anyone, not truly. Her parents were too stern and the house too tight for things like secrets with paws. Then, one morning, he was gone. No warning, no sound, just a damp spot on the porch. Her toast untouched. And the dreadful knowledge that someone, maybe everyone, had known all along. And let it happen. Her mother only said, "He came when you needed him." That's all. Clara had nodded. And then, forgotten, boxed it, shoved it backward inside her. Until today. Until she opened her eyes again. Out past the lace-trimmed curtain, moonlight scalloped the edge of the windowsill. The yard just beyond swayed with the barest breath of wind. And there, under the old walnut tree, a shape, not threatening, not clear, but she knew its edges like her own name. For a second, her hand reached toward the window. The glass was cool against her palm. She didn't open it, didn't speak. Something told her that would break whatever thread still hung in the air. But she didn't need to say anything anyway. Because he lingered for only a heartbeat longer, long enough for her to press her forehead to the pane. And then he turned, and faded into the black. No rustle, no footfall, gone. As if he'd stayed only long enough to know she'd remembered. As if that was all she needed to sleep. Morning came slow, as if the earth itself didn't want to move too quickly. Dew settled heavy across the field, catching sunlight like lace. The kind of morning that patted in softly, warm enough to be kind, cool enough to remind you it was October. Clara stepped out barefoot onto the porch, wood chilled beneath her toes. She half expected to see movement by the edge of the trees. A flick of gold, a familiar stillness waiting, but there was nothing, no dog, just the loamy scent of turned soil, cinnamon from someone's leftover cider, and the breath of fog curling low against the ground. She scanned the space beneath the walnut tree, the hollow by the split rail fence. Even the stool where someone had left a checkered napkin folded like a forgotten letter. No pawprints in the dew. No warmth pressed into the grass. Only silence. She walked to the edge of the stone path, heart crooked inside her chest, not quite breaking, not whole. Behind her, the house stirred. Plates clinked in the tiny kitchen. Caleb's voice rose in a question, muffled and harmless. Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned once more toward the trees, as if he might be waiting just behind the line of sunlight. Still nothing. Her fingers shook when she lifted them to her scarf. The same scarf, still lavender touched from the day before. A small voice broke behind her. Where did he go? It was one of the children, Daisy. The one with missing front teeth and a crown of leaves she refused to remove. Clara turned and crouched beside her. "I don't know," Clara said softly. Daisy scowled at the field. "He didn't even say goodbye." "No," Clara whispered. "He didn't." Daisy looked up. "Will he come back?" Before Clara could speak, a voice answered from behind them. Marjorie, leaning heavy on her cane. Smile soft around the edges. "They come back when they're needed," she said. Daisy blinked at her. "Promise?" Marjorie nodded once. Sure as stars remember where they shone. Satisfied, Daisy wandered off to braid more weeds into her crown. Clara stood slowly, brushing her dress smooth. She walked back toward the porch, passing Marjorie, who caught her hand in hers gently. "You remember now," her aunt said without question. "I do." "Good," Marjorie said. "Don't go forgetting again." Clara smiled faintly. I'll try. The old woman patted her hand once and turned back toward the warmth of idle conversation and tea. Clara remained alone for a moment longer. She looked out again at the tree line. Still empty, still waiting, and yet, the ache she carried felt softer somehow. Not grief, not quite, something gentler, like a page returned to its book. A thread woven back through a familiar cloth. She stepped back inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. Weeks rolled by like soft thunder in the distance, present, but not urgent. The shimmer of wedding day started to fade into the silk of memory. Clara adjusted, as people do. Back to papers, to plants, to the quiet rituals of post-celebration life. Writing thank you cards with ink that pooled into leaves. Pressing flowers between book pages no one would open again. It was during a trip to her childhood home, an old farmhouse now silent with too many closed rooms, that she found them. In the upstairs closet, behind winter coats too small for any current body, a cardboard box waited. Dust softened its edges, written in a shaky, youthful scrawl, "Do not throw away." She carried it into the softened light of the hallway, sat cross-legged like she once had in every room as a kid, and began unpacking small things. Ribbons, sea glass from an Oregon beach, a plastic compass that pointed incorrectly in every direction, and notebooks, dozens, spiral-bound and worn at the spines, pages curled from age and humidity. She opened one. The first page was written in all capital letters. Stories of Leo and the Moon Wind. Clara felt her breath gather in her throat. She turned pages slowly. Each one was an adventure. Leo in the foggy otherwood, finding the golden stone that made mushrooms sing. Leo in a boat made of cedar and string, sailing across a pond of stars. Leo wrapping a wounded comet in velvet and tucking it behind a cloud where no one could hurt it. The writing was unpolished but vivid. And the voice, it didn't sound like a child's. It sounded like someone much older pretending to be young. She could remember crouching at her desk with her pencil dusk-worn, scribbling in the afterglow of days she wanted to last forever. But the stories? She couldn't recall their details until now, like discovering a part of herself had kept writing even when she hadn't picked up a pencil in years. Page after page, Leo always arrives. Leo always helps. Leo always leaves just before dawn. And the endings, none were unhappy. But each held a particular ache. A soft door closing, a shadow waving goodbye. Clara found her own name once in the margins. Clara and Leo go to the mushroom market. In parentheses. She promises to remember this time. She closed the notebook gently, palms pressed to the front cover. Even now, so many years later, she could feel it. That need to preserve something fragile that once saved her. And maybe still was. Downstairs, her father called out, wondering if she wanted lunch or just planned to keep haunting old rooms. She smiled faintly, folded the notebooks into a clean satchel, and whispered, just once, "I didn't forget." Pages rustled, or maybe, they sighed. The slope behind the university garden was rarely walked. Most didn't even notice it, tucked between faculty cottages and the old greenhouse, overgrown and humming with quiet. Clara had gone there once on a late October afternoon, drawn by a strange italic in the wind. A rustle that felt written in cursive. At the time, she was cataloging root rot in historic trees and had followed a broken deer path out of casual curiosity. It led her to the oak. Old beyond measure, bark thick with moss the color of old songs. Its branches reached like cathedral arms, and something in its presence hushed the thoughts beneath her thoughts. She'd noticed nothing unusual, until the tiny cluster of flowers blooming at its base. Not native, impossible, Really? A foxglove tree. Delicate trumpet blossoms, the color of bruised light, nodded gently in the wind, petals too soft for the season. Curious, she crouched, fingertips hovering just above the soil. No frostbite on the leaves. No yellowing. The tree swayed once, faintly. She didn't write it down. Didn't tell her colleagues. Something about the moment asked for reverence, not record. But what she did do, uncharacteristically, was sit. She leaned her back against the gnarled oak, knees pulled to her chest, and stared out at the horizon smudged in dusk. She told herself it was to catch her breath. That's when she saw the carving. Just below the line of the foxglove's bark, half swallowed by moss and time. 4 letters. Leo. She had touched the letters then, softly, as if they might smudge. She didn't remember carving it. She didn't remember visiting that place, ever. And yet, the grooves were the size of her thumb. The depth like something carved with purpose. Weeks later, back in her home office, she thought of it again. She found herself sketching foxglove petals in the corner of her lab report, a habit she hadn't had since her teens. And then it arrived. A small photograph, slipped into her campus mailbox in an unmarked envelope. Black and white. The oak, the foxglove, and barely visible to the right, a blur of movement. A dog's hind leg and tail. Gold gray, like a thought nearly forgotten. No stamp, no return address. Just a note, typed on old cardstock. You always plant something after meeting him. Even if you don't mean to. Clara stared at it for a long time. Then tucked the note into her field journal, between pressed fern and rain blotches. She didn't mention it to Caleb. Later that month, their front garden began to sprout foxglove. They hadn't planted any. They began gently. Dreams that didn't feel like dreams. Not vivid, not strange. Just quiet places where time didn't work the way it usually did. Where footsteps didn't echo and the moss seemed to breathe. Clara would walk through forests she hadn't catalogued, hand-brushing ferns that folded back like hands remembering. She was barefoot in some. In others, cloaked in the wedding veil, long and streaming like a comet's tail. Always beside her, the sound. Not footsteps. Not quite. More like the hush of fur against soil. The rhythm of presence. Sometimes she saw him. Leo, or the dog that remembered being him. He never ran, never barked. He walked beside her, eyes forward, sometimes watching the path, sometimes glancing at her. In one dream, she was small again. 7, knees riddled with grass scrapes. Her hands were sticky with jam. Adult Clara watched from behind a tree. Child Clara sat on the porch steps, whispering into a dog's ear. He can tell when I'm lying, she said. And when I'm scared, so I stop doing both. Leo blinked, then pressed his head to her arm. In another, Clara wandered through thick fog until it parted like theater curtains, and there was Leo, waiting atop a hill dotted with bluebells. He didn't approach, just wagged his tail, twice. She laughed aloud in her sleep that night. Woke with tears drying on her cheeks. Caleb stirred beside her but said nothing. She didn't need to explain. Over the next few weeks, the dreams grew richer. She began to remember the textures. The specific sound of Leo's paws stepping on frozen leaves. The warmth of his side when she leaned in mid-walk. She began journaling again, not just field notes but entries titled things like, "The Gate of Birch," and "Leo's Star Map." She filled pages in amber ink, handwriting more looping than before. One night, the dream was different. Clara walked beneath a sky too large to hold. Beside her, Leo, but this time, her hand reached out and brushed his back. It was warm, real. She turned to him and said, why do you come back?" For the first time, the silence answered. Not in words, but in her own voice, echoing gently. "Because I promised I'd remember." She sank to her knees. Crushed leaves beneath her smelled like fire and honey. Leo stepped in close, resting his head on her shoulder. She didn't cry. There was no need. She woke just before dawn, breath steady, heart warm. The house was still. Caleb hadn't stirred. Outside the window, frost kissed the porch railings, spelling delicate patterns that would vanish by morning. Clara pressed her fingers to the pane. "I remember." She didn't whisper it, she just knew it, and the knowing curled inside her like sleep, like story, like something lit from the inside and never meant to burn out. Weeks ripened into months. Clara returned to her patterns, papers filed along oak-topped desks, specimens clipped into glass petri, early walks before fog could burn off fully. Life unfolded quietly, the way it always had. But something stayed, not a heaviness, a thread. Sometimes she felt it pull, barely there, like fishing line through water, taut beneath stillness. Then the photographer emailed. The subject line read, "Gallery preview, your golden hour magic." Clara opened it on a Thursday. Rain on the windows, a rosemary loaf in the oven. She clicked the link, half distracted, expecting group shots, dancing feet, candid laughter caught in the swing of shirt sleeves. The images loaded slowly, Caleb lifting her veil with that crooked grin. Her sister pressing her forehead to hers. The bouquet toss. Spark-littered dusk. Their hands clasped over cake crumbs and candle glass. But then came one photo. She stopped. It was from the fence, just before dinner. Clara in profile, light netted through her veil. The creased maple behind her turning its last shade. And in the background, small, unassuming, the dog, unblurred, despite the depth. Eyes closed, head bowed slightly, as if he had been pausing, not to rest, but to listen. To remember. The caption below the image read, "Bride in Stillness." It was posted as part of the photographer's public portfolio. A few days later, comments began to appear beneath it. "Beautiful shot. But, whose dog? He's so still. Like he's praying. Okay, this is creepy. He looks like a dog I had when I was 10. Same expression. Same golden fur. He used to sit just like that. He looks like he's waiting for someone. I swear I met a dog exactly like this at my cousin's wedding. He wasn't ours, but everyone let him stay." Clara watched the thread grow. Dozens of tiny stories, shared memories, people recalling dogs no one believed in, or that no photo ever caught. She scrolled in silence, heart ticking louder than the clicks. She had never told anyone what she remembered. Not really, not yet, not even Caleb, but under the photo, among the comments, she typed a single line. No name, no explanation, just, "Sometimes they come back, just long enough." She hit send, closed the screen, and went outside. The sky was folded in wool. Sparrows low in the branches. A hush held beneath things. Clara looked toward the edge of the yard. Empty, still, but she felt it again, that tug. Not from behind, from within, and knew he'd been there, watching her look, just to be sure. October settled into itself with the ease of a worn quilt, edges soft, colors sunk into the fabric of each day. Clara and Caleb walked the wooded trail that wrapped behind their home, boots crunching over dry leaves, the leash in Clara's hand slack. Thistle, now a thick-chested mutt of uncertain lineage, trotted ahead, tail waving like a flag stitched by a child. The forest had changed, yet stayed the same. Saplings grown into slender trees since their wedding. A fallen log now riddled with mushrooms. Familiar bends that still creaked in the wind. They didn't speak much. Words, after all, had started to feel optional between them. Comfort was built in the rhythm of matching pace, of shared silences. Thistle paused to sniff a moss-covered stone, then sneezed and bounded forward, distracted by some imagined squirrel. Clara smiled, adjusted her scarf. A little farther down the trail, they came to the bend near the old stream bed, where summer thins the water and winter freezes it dumb. That's when they saw it. Just off the path, resting atop a flat-faced rock. One red leaf, golden-veined, arranged perfectly, stem down, point-angled like an arrow aimed back the way they'd come. Clara slowed to a stop. Beside the leaf, a single paw print, larger than Thistle's, pressed deep into the damp earth as though placed deliberately, a mark left, not made. Thistle sniffed at it once. Then, uncharacteristically calm, sat back on his haunches. Caleb raised a brow. "You see that?" Clara nodded. "Doesn't match his paws," he added, watching Thistle's soft feet. "No," Clara murmured. "It doesn't." They stood there for a moment, wind drawing cool lines across their faces. The trees whispered. Somewhere a jay called twice, sharp and echoing. Then, as though released from a spell, Thistle stood and ambled ahead again, leash tugging gently. Clara followed. Her hand lingered for a moment on the edge of the red leaf as they passed, fingertips grazing its edge. There was no message. There didn't need to be. A hello, a remember, a trace left like breath on winter glass. She tucked her scarf closer beneath her coat, kept walking, and didn't look back. The baby came on the first frost. The windows had already begun to fog when Clara whispered Caleb's name in the dark, her voice threaded with both fear and something older, expectation, or maybe just knowing. Labor was soundless, mostly. As if her body understood the month, the hour, the history of quiet arrivals. She held her child before the dawn. A daughter, small and solemn, with fists like seeds and eyes too large for her face. They named her Juniper, not because it meant anything, but because it felt like it did. In the hospital room, tangled in hush and linen, Clara rocked her gently, humming a tune she couldn't place. The kind with no real beginning, and no end. Outside the window, frost drew lace. "I knew someone once," Clara whispered, to no one but the quiet heartbeat in her arms. Not a person, not quite. The baby opened one eye. Clara smiled. He was a very good boy. The baby exhaled sharply, as if in agreement, and turned her head toward the window. Then paused. Clara followed her gaze. Nothing there, just early light smudging awake behind the distant trees. Just the long slope of the world brushing off sleep. Then Juniper raised one tiny hand, fingers uncurling slowly, palm facing out, toward something Clara could not see, but felt. A warmth, faint, familiar, a presence too soft to leave footprints, but not too soft to leave something behind. Clara's breath caught, then steadied. She pressed her lips to her daughter's brow and closed her eyes. And in that moment, the room held something it hadn't before. Not a sound, not a shape, just the echo of paws on old leaves. The warmth of fur beside the cradle of memory. A thread, pulled tight. Still holding. Years later, the story faded, not entirely, but in the way candle scent lingers long after the light is gone. Juniper grew, quick-footed, mud-kneed, hair always full of leaves. She loved the woods, talked to trees, found patterns in bark the way some kids find them in clouds. "They remember things," she said once. "Not words, but shapes." Clara smiled, never disagreed. One afternoon, Juniper went rummaging through a forgotten box in the attic. A clatter of time-worn notebooks and pressed petals. She brought one down, dust covering the cover like a second skin. "Mom," she asked, "who's Leo?" Clara paused, the sink still dripping, the tea still steeping. "Why do you ask?" Juniper pointed to a page filled with careful loops. "He's in here. He helps the moon sleep. And he teaches the stars how to whistle." Clara stepped closer, took the notebook, turned a few pages. Her own childhood scrawl looked up at her, messy and earnest. Words written like spells. She hadn't touched that one in years. Juniper tilted her head. Was he real? Clara lowered herself into the kitchen chair and looked out the window. The trees out back swayed gently. No footprints. No fur. Just the hum of everything somehow waiting. He was, she said quietly. But not the usual kind of real. Juniper blinked. Is he still alive? Clara considered. Maybe not like we are. But I think he's still, somewhere. Juniper nodded once, as if this answer fit just fine. Then I think I met him. Clara turned, breath slipping. When? In dreams, she said. He walks with me sometimes. He doesn't talk. He just listens. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then reached out and ran her fingers gently through her daughter's wind-tangled curls. That's how he always was. Juniper grinned. I told him I'd remember. A lump caught in Clara's throat. Outside, wind stirred a curtain. And somewhere deep in the trees, too quiet to name, a single leaf let go. Autumn returned like a letter addressed in familiar handwriting. Juniper was 12 when she began sketching animals in her notebooks. None of them from real life. Foxes with feathered ears, birds with moss on their wings. And always, somewhere in the corner, the dog. Golden, and labeled, but unmistakable. Clara noticed first by accident. A page left open, half finished while Juniper set the table. The dog's brows were the same, soft arches of thought. The tail curved in that quiet, question-like way, as if it could sense a direction the world had yet to name. She said nothing, just touched the corner of the drawing with a single finger. That night, Clara dreamed again. This time, there was no forest. No path. Just a wide field under twilight. And Leo lying there, tail thumping slow. She walked to him, unsure. Her dress trailed wind. When she knelt beside him, he didn't move. But he looked at her. And he smiled, not with teeth, not with eyes, but with everything else. In the morning, Clara told no one. The next week, Juniper asked about preserving leaves. She collected them by color now, golds and crimsons pressed thick between waxed paper. She laid them out on the porch in strange patterns. Sometimes arrows, sometimes circles. Once, the outline of a dog curled up, sleeping. Clara watched from the kitchen window. Later that night, Juniper asked, "Do you think dogs know things before we do?" Clara replied, after a pause, "I think some of them do." Juniper nodded and went back to sorting leaves by softness. Seasons passed in woolen rain and fresh ink. One evening in February, Juniper entered quietly into Clara's study, a notebook clutched like something important. "I think I've been writing stories about him," she said. Without meaning to. "Is that weird?" Clara took the notebook, turned the fragile pages. One story was called, "The Gold Dog Between." Another, "Leo, Who Grew the North Star." Clara smiled gently. "No," she said, "it's not weird at all." Juniper hesitated. "Do you think I made him up? Or did you?" Clara looked out the window, where the wind had gathered along the eaves. "I think," she said slowly, "we both remembered him. That's all." Juniper accepted that with quiet certainty, as only children and stars know how. In the weeks that followed, more stories came. Juniper began to speak less about Leo and draw more. But every sketch bore his shape, even if it blurred among roots or shadows or the curve of tree bark. Clara placed one on the mantel where the wedding photo had once stood. Visitors asked who the dog was. She only smiled. A friend, she would say. An old one. And sometimes, when the house was still before sleep, and the wind curled into the corners of the bedroom, Clara would reach for her scarf. Not for its warmth, but for the memory woven into its thread. And feel, even now, the hush of pause outside the dream. Still there, still near, and needed. It rained gently the day Juniper left for university. Just the kind that misted your eyelashes and softened the trees into watercolors. Clara stood on the porch longer than she needed to, watching the car retreat down the old gravel road, taillights blinking through the gray. The forest had grown wilder since their wedding. Vines curled bolder around the fence posts. Moss thickened like time, refusing to be swept away. In Juniper's now empty room, the walls were still pinned with sketches. Some yellowed, curling at the edges. Others more recent, dogs in shadows, in stars, curled on moons. All unnamed but one in the center, brighter than the rest. On the back, for Mom. For remembering first. Clara didn't cry. She just sat on the bed, tracing the lines, smiling the kind of smile you practice only after parting with something precious many times. That night, she boiled tea leaves from her own garden, reached for a blanket folded with the scent of lemon balm and old cedar, and stepped out to the porch, where the night opened itself wide in velvet. The woods breathed. No wind, no creatures. Just the kind of layered silence that carried history. She hummed. The melody had no name, but it had been sung many times, between dreams, between heartbeats, in halls of memory stronger than stone. When Clara went to sleep, she dreamed of a clearing. Not new, not old, just waiting. She stood barefoot, light pooling at her heels, and the forest opened. And from it came a shape. Walking calmly, golden fur, slow gait, tail like a lantern. Leo, not aged, not young, exactly as he had always been, an egg shaped like hope. Clara knelt. He approached, and placed his brow against hers. She whispered, "She remembers now." He blinked once, then turned, and from the shadows, another shape, smaller, lighter, flickering like light through leaves. A pup, clumsy, bright-eyed, unsure. It ambled forward, stumbled toward Clara with a soft puff of breath that made no sound but carried something unmistakable. She reached out. It pressed its head into her palm. Leo stood beside them, silent, watching, and somehow smiling, though his face never changed. Clara looked once more into his eyes. They didn't glow. They didn't burn. They simply saw. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. He bent his head, turned, and walked into the woods, where dawn was beginning to bloom. When Clara woke, the light in the room was soft gold. She sat up, stretched. There, by the bedroom door, her scarf had fallen to the floor. The lavender scent rose faintly as she lifted it, folded it twice, and pressed it to her chest. And outside, in the yard, beneath the walnut tree, a small patch of grass had been gently flattened. As if something had rested there. Just for a while. The letter arrived in late spring, tucked between a folded seed catalog and a local newsletter. Clara wouldn't have noticed it if not for the smudge of golden dust near the stamp, an odd glimmer that caught the morning sun and lingered on her fingertips. It was addressed by hand. No return name, no postmark, The handwriting was unfamiliar and gentle, as though written by someone who remembered how to hold things softly. Inside, one sheet of thick, fibrous paper. Handmade, smelling faintly of mint and soil. The message was simple, a single sentence. They keep their promise, even when we forget we made one. No name, no signature. Clara sat with it at the kitchen table where morning had just crept in, casting light across her tea, her fingertips. The ink had bled slightly, as if the words had waited in dampness before choosing to arrive. She read it once more, then reached instinctively for the drawer near her hip, pulled it open to reveal a bundle of wedding photographs wrapped in velvet ribbon. Tucked between the images was a napkin-stained copy of that first group photo, her and Caleb, hands entwined, Wren laughing, and in the far corner, there he was. The dog, Leo, fur braided by wind, ears slightly back, mid-blink. As though he'd just heard a sound only he could understand. Clara folded the letter carefully and slid it inside the envelope, slipping it into a book of pressed fern fronds. That night, as evening fog crept like silk toward the porch rail, Clara and Caleb sat beneath the old walnut tree, wrapped in quiet, watching Juniper's childhood trail dissolve into the dark. "I had a dream again," Clara murmured. Caleb squeezed her hand without looking over. "Him?" She nodded, but this time, he wasn't alone. Caleb waited. "There was a whole field of them," she said. "Dogs. Dozens. All shades. All quiet. Just watching. Were they for you?" Clara shook her head gently. "I don't think so. I think they were for someone else." Waiting their turn, they sat in silence for a long time, listening to the earth exhale. Fireflies blinked like shy thoughts all around them. A few stars began to burn above the ridges. Then, a sound, soft, unhurried, the faint patter of paws. They turned. Nothing, just wind threading itself through the grass. Just the shifting hush of growing things. But Clara knew. "I think someone nearby will need him soon," she whispered. Caleb looked at her. "Will they know it's him?" She smiled faintly, gaze still on the dark. "They won't need to." Behind them, the wind touched the windows once, gentle. Not a knock, just a nudge, a reminder. And somewhere beyond the reach of lantern light, a pair of eyes opened, not hungry, not wild. Patient, and shining. The day Juniper returned was one of those mid-autumn hours where the air was neither warm nor cold, just soft, like everything had already exhaled once before you arrived. She came with a canvas bag over one shoulder, boots muddy, hair longer than Clara remembered. She didn't knock, just opened the door and grinned the same half-grin from when she was 5 and hiding beetles in teacups. Clara wrapped her in a hug that didn't ask questions. That evening, they sat beneath the walnut tree again. The sky was that deepening indigo that seemed to bend just a little closer than before. The porch lights hummed but didn't glow, just stood nearby, on alert. Juniper pulled out a small journal. "I brought something for you." Clara raised an eyebrow, accepting the notebook. Its cover was hand-stitched, softened with ash and rosemary oils. Inside, drawings. More dogs. Gold ones. Gray. Sky blue. Always in the background of something. The shadows of doorways. Reflections in still water. Curling at the feet of queens and children and wanderers. "They follow people," Juniper murmured, eyes on the stars through the spindly branches. "Not to be seen, just to be near the moments when we remember." Clara didn't speak, just gently turned another page. One sketch stopped her. A clearing, a tangle of birch, a wedding canopy. In the corner, the dog. Not full-bodied, not centered, just tail and paw. But the smell of that day rustled through her like wind in pressed pages. Juniper pulled her knees to her chest. It's strange, she said. I don't think he's just one dog, you know. Clara nodded slowly. Maybe he never was. Juniper rested her chin on one knee. Maybe they're pieces. Of what? She thought a moment. Then, of when love waited. A log crackled in the fire pit. Nearby, something small rustled through the mulch. They didn't turn to watch. Clara handed the journal back. Juniper tucked it inside her coat. Then, across the clearing, by the woven trellis beneath the maple turning orange as candlelight, movement. Not loud, not large, just enough. Gold, maybe, or gray. Hard to tell in this kind of dusk. Juniper saw it too. She didn't rise, didn't call out. She just smiled, tilted her head. The shape paused, then wagged its tail, once. Clara felt her chest ache in that remembered way. Juniper whispered, "Go on." The shape stepped closer, slow and sure. Juniper didn't flinch as it reached her feet. She lowered a hand, palm open. The nose pressed it gently, reverently. Juniper stroked the invisible fur once. Then drew her hand back and looked at her mother. "He's not just watching anymore," she said. Clara blinked tears she didn't mind. "I think," she said, "his waiting's over." The shape lay down at Juniper's side, and this time, even in the thick light, Clara saw him clearly. Leo. She didn't question it, didn't need to. The wind didn't rise. The trees didn't whisper. But something certain wrapped around the clearing like a promise kept. Like a story turned full circle. And from then on, neither of them ever walked alone again.